Hey, all you experts out there, this is the Monetize Your Expertise podcast, where we show you how to use your skills to pay the bills. Have you ever wanted to create a business that positions you as the industry leader and go-to expert? Join me every week to hear from amazing leaders and entrepreneurs who have successfully refined their skills in order to become experts and create extremely profitable knowledge businesses. To find all of the links and tools mentioned in this episode, just go to myepodcast.com. I'm your host, Grant Weherley, the online course guy, helping you every week to monetize your expertise. Hey everybody, and thanks for joining me on this podcast episode. In this episode, I'm really excited to bring to you lots of techniques and perspectives about being an authority, about being an expert, because it's something that is incredibly useful and valuable and impactful. But it's a really interesting concept because the concept of being an authority, of being a recognized figure in your industry, that concept operates a lot differently than we generally perceive, even though we attach such weight to it. So that's what we're getting into today. So stick with me through the whole episode. There's lots of good quality information and specific strategies in this episode, and let's dive into it. So first off, I want to start with a story. It's the story of my very first course. It's actually the very first thing I did as an entrepreneur, and I created an online course, and it's a really interesting example illustrating the fact that the way we think about being an expert, about being an authority, is very different than the way it actually works. So the first course I made in my life, the first thing I did in business, was I created a course about ADHD. Now, when I told people that at the time, that I was creating that, people were asking me, do you have a degree in psychology? Or like, why are you doing this, basically? And my answer was, no, I have a degree in economics. I don't know. I felt like it. I thought it was a good need and a good topic to talk about. And so that sounds like a challenge, right? Like, think about this, where you're just getting started creating something basically for the first time. You have no official credibility. You're not really sure what you're doing. You're making lots of mistakes because it's your first go at things. It's a really uncomfortable feeling. And I remember feeling that way and feeling, there's a good word for it, Impostor Syndrome, I guess, where you're just like, why am I talking about this? I don't have a PhD in this. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a blah, 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 blah. But at the time, I just had to have faith that I was going to put out great content and that people would love it regardless, right? What was interesting is that I did my best to create really high quality content, and, it's still floating around and people still really, really like it. And it's funny is because after creating that, I had so many interesting conversations with people who were just basically way higher up than I was in terms of a status sense. So for example, people with PhDs, people with established entrepreneurial records they started reaching out to me and sort of in a way where you could tell by their tone, it's like they were reaching out to me as the person with status. And I was like, whoa, this is interesting. It's like, you're the one with a PhD, right? Like, I was self-conscious about the fact that I didn't have that. But what's interesting is that purely by creating something that's high quality, people start to have interesting perspectives of you. If you've ever Googled something, how to do something, you've gone to a blog post that was really well written, it was really high quality, it was well researched, it was very specific, you really enjoyed it. Well, if you looked at the author section, you automatically assume that person is really, really credible in that area, even though your basis for that assumption is based on the fact that they've put out good content. It's interesting to stop and think about, how do we perceive somebody that we call an expert? Because in reality, it's total BS. Like, we use these shorthand methods, understanding for assuming essentially whether somebody is credible or not. And for example, if you look at, let's say, Mark Zuckerberg or something, he's giving a speech and he introduces you to the people in the audience to talk about your Facebook advertising revenue model. And you get up there, and before you start speaking, I'm going to assume you probably don't know much about Facebook's business model, about their advertising system. But before you even open your mouth, people are going to assume you're the expert on that, right? Because somebody very credible and knowledgeable and, somewhat famous has introduced you to speak about that thing. And you will have that credibility until you open your mouth and reveal that you know nothing about it, right? But And all else being equal, until that happens, until somebody's disproved to have credibility, we have these certain assumptions that the person has credibility based on certain kinds of indicators. For example, if you see certain acronyms behind the person's name, you will assume they have status. If somebody reputable or famous that has credibility that you've seen elsewhere introduces somebody else, the credibility transfers. There's all kinds of really interesting things that we do like this mentally, and it's something that's really important to understand and to leverage so that you can too be the expert. You can have that credibility in a way that is very genuine, right? And what's interesting is you can also think about the way people game this system, right? Like sometimes you come across people that at first seem really credible, and then it's all just like the face of things. And that's the opposite of what we want to do, right? We want to have really, really intense credibility through genuine ways, not through shady tactics of just appearing to have credibility. At the end of the day, we don't want to be up on that stage talking about Facebook's business model around advertising because we don't know anything about that. But here's some simple ways to get people to start perceiving you as an expert just automatically. And again, they'll perceive you as an expert through these methods until you disprove them, essentially. So so the main thing is to do these things and then also live up to that status. The first main thing you can do is to put out some damn good content. I kind of referenced this before, but if you write a decent book, which is, by the way, not very hard to do, but there's still this perception that it's a really awesome thing to do. If you're seen as an author, there's all kinds of really interesting things that start to happen with that too, right? Because you're an author now, and you're an author on whatever topic you wrote a book about. So naturally, you're the expert, right? You wrote a book about it. And now this won't work as well if it's a really bad book, but if it's even decent, then you're going to have, most likely, people start reaching out to you as like, hey, I saw your book. That's really cool. Can I interview about this? I want you on my podcast. Or like, you want to do a guest post about this topic? And people do that assuming you're now the expert because you wrote a book about it, right? And so it's really interesting. And sometimes people think it's intimidating to do something like writing a book, but it's nowadays really, really simple. It's literally just creating a certain kind of formatted Word document and uploading it to Amazon. And there you go. Now you're an expert. The next thing you can do is write really well-written and well-researched blog posts. Very few people take the time to really write thorough blog posts. Most people write, if they write anything at all, very generic, rehashed, unactionable blog posts that are like, oh yeah, you should have the mindset of being an entrepreneur and blah, 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 and avoid this general mistake. And it's just very underwhelming. But if you take the time, write really, really, really high quality blog posts, and anybody at all sees it, you're getting mad credibility for that. Now that's also, okay, these are time consuming. I understand. Don't complain too much, but it's worth it at the end of the day if it's a topic in an industry that you're trying to become an expert in, you're trying to become the go-to figure for. The next thing you can do is create high quality online courses. So again, this is very similar to the other strategies. Again, these are just different formats of creating good quality content. These are different channels to do this. So it all operates the same way, right? It doesn't really matter what the person's credibility is if somebody ends up in your online course. So I will say it matters in terms of selling it, like testimonials and talking about results you've gotten for people, et cetera, et cetera. But once somebody's actually in a course of yours, once they're taking it and they're like, wow, this is really good. Well, they don't stop and start looking you up and seeing where you got your degree, or if you got a degree at all, or, what your last client said about you, or what, they don't really care. If it's good quality content, it's good quality content. So you can create a high quality online course. You can start a podcast, and that's also related to, you can start interviewing experts that are way cooler than you, and you start getting credibility by association, and you can interview them for a YouTube channel. You can interview them for a podcast. You can interview them for extra bonuses in online courses, or just put them on your blog. You can do all kinds of stuff with interviews. I'm really a big fan of interviews because of the side benefits of the credibility by association, and also it's just really high quality content that's so easy to make. And you're now connected to the expert. So, and finally, you can also co-create content with an expert. If you know anything about podcasting, blogging, online courses, etc., well, hey, you can start reaching out to people who are more credible but less knowledgeable about that specific thing and offer to co-create the content with them, split the revenue, and basically take care of all the work. And now you're really tied to this person. So those are some really effective ways to create high quality content, to start becoming the go-to figure, to start achieving that expert status. But that's not all. You can also start building credibility indicators, right? So you can start giving free talks at conferences, at universities, or any kind of organization that fits your market, and record it, because then you have a recording of you giving a pretty legit speech about some topic at some kind of an organization. And purely by the mental image of that, once somebody sees that you're speaking in front of some kind of audience, you immediately become pretty impressive. And it's pretty simple to do. Another thing you can do, this only works really in some industries, is you can just buy a membership to an impressive sounding organization and start putting the acronyms of it behind your name. And I actually did this with my first course about ADHD. I joined some ADHD related organizations for like $30 per year each or something, and started putting, I don't know, whatever the acronyms were, I don't even remember now. I started putting those after my name as credibility indicators. And it's just a little small thing that's subtle that people don't even pay attention to. I never once had anybody ask me what the acronyms stood for. So I guess you could actually just probably make up acronyms and throw it behind your name. But if you want to be somewhat legit, you can just buy a membership to an organization to add those actual letters behind your name. And then people are like, ooh, this person's got letters behind their name. It's not PhD, but it's something, so it must be good, right? Another thing you can do, which this is just good business practice. Honestly, it's like not directly the biggest way to become an expert or an authority, but indirectly it's huge. And that's just to network with everybody in your industry. Start getting those associations, those opportunities, start opening those conversations. But more importantly, which is somewhat related, and this is especially useful because nowadays a lot of those conversations will probably happen through Skype or something, is to go sign up through this really cool service that I like. It's a specific kind of call scheduler called sohelpful.me, so sohelpful.me, to schedule calls. But the reason I use it is it's great for collecting testimonials. So people schedule calls with you through this like front page of testimonials that other people have left for you from other calls. And this is something that's really easy to preload with some testimonials from people you know that you've worked with before. And you sort of set up your own expert status, and you start having these calls with people, especially if you have calls with anybody who's somewhat reputable, then guess what? Now you've got their testimonials on your page. And these are great to just have in the future for any kind of product you need to have a testimonial for, or just, I don't know, email marketing. Like, the testimonials are insanely useful in terms of credibility. And that's just a great tool to start collecting them automatically just through scheduling calls. Now, the third main way you can achieve expert status and become that authority figure is to, wait for it, actually become an expert. Go figure. It might seem silly, but it's actually an important component in being an authority. And strategies for doing it are pretty simple, but pretty effective and often overlooked. So the first thing I would say is that if you're trying to become the something person, the go-to person for X topic, well, start identifying yourself as the X guy or girl. So if you're the Facebook advertising guy or girl, if you're the email marketing guy or girl, actually I have a friend who is that, but actually he calls himself the autoresponder guy. I refer to myself as the online course guy, or actually I change it up every now and again as needed. And you can call yourself whatever you want. And also people will also tend to call you something like that as a shorthand for introducing you to people and referrals and things like that. And so if you create that status, that title for yourself, then it makes it really easy for people to identify you, to remember you, to refer you to other people when it's relevant, when it's applicable. So if somebody's asking about Facebook ads and you're the Facebook ad person in their mind, well, they're going to refer you. They're going to bring you up. You're going to come to their mind. And that's what status is about. So just the concept of having that title, creating it for yourself, even just put it in your email signature, and then people will automatically start to see that. Put it in your about page. Really simple things that start to create that status for you. The next thing is actually, this is probably the most important thing that I want to mention. It's probably pretty obvious, but very few people, surprisingly, tend to do this. And that's actually just to learn as much as you possibly freaking can. Now, you can learn from people and you can read books. Yeah, so I'd say those probably are the two best things to do. So I'm going to break that down into two things. One, read crap tons of books about everything. Every successful person that I know that's really successful, either currently or in the past, has read a crap ton of books. And it's one of the best ways to be sharp and be knowledgeable about everything and be respected for having expertise on things. And then the second thing is just to learn from other people. Now, that sounds obvious, right? But I've watched so many people squander opportunities to learn from other people. The average person will, if they get a chance to have a coffee with like the highest person in their industry, they're probably going to like try and impress the other person, the more expert senior person. They'll try and impress that other person, and they won't ask questions, it blows my mind when I've seen this. Like for example, sometimes some person comes to me to try and like learn from me essentially, but then they try and talk the whole time. And it's insanity because you're missing so many opportunities just to ask questions, right? So you know everything that you already know. And there's really no benefit to you to telling me what you know, aside from trying to appear more credible. But actually, I found the opposite is more useful. When you ask lots of really smart questions all the time, and this is actually, there's lots of good quotes about like really ultra successful people that talk about a really great tip to success is double your amount of questions that you ask. And specifically with respect to the number of statements that you make, always ask way more questions than you make statements. It's great for negotiating, learning, connecting with people. It's really interesting. So simple, but really effective. So when I have calls with people, and especially if I'm trying to impress somebody who's more credible or I don't know, rich or famous or anything like that, I always ask shit tons of questions. And that's actually one of the best ways for them to really be interested in you, because it's better for connecting with people. It's better for learning from them. And it's also a great way to actually appear very intelligent, right? Even if you're asking questions about something you don't know about, if you ask smart questions, which doesn't really require a lot of precursor knowledge, you'll appear very intelligent and very credible. And it's actually much better and more effective. And I say this from experience than trying to just talk a bunch and impress the other person. When people do that with me and they just try and sort of talk over me the whole time, I view them as much less intelligent than somebody who asks smart questions. And it's just human nature, although for some reason we have the reverse assumption that's true. So that's just something to keep in mind. Ask tons of questions, try and learn from people, try and read tons of books. And again, call yourself the something person, whatever your thing is that you're trying to be known for. And finally, the last thing I want to say is that you want to strive to understand your specific market and speak to their needs and their desires. So this is probably pretty cliche, but it was something I always rolled my eyes at when I first heard this, when I was first becoming an entrepreneur. But now I really understand why it's so important, because if you're having, a consultation call, or if you're connecting with another entrepreneur in your industry or what have you, if you understand your market, then you can sort of jump on needs. You can speak to people's desires. You can really say things which resonate with people. And that's really effective because, for example, I actually just had a free consultation which turned into a high ticket sale recently. And basically my approach was listen, question, listen, and then sort of transition into, okay, given everything you said, I'm trying to think about the best way to help you. I think it sounds like you're saying which was based on my previous experience of really deeply understanding the market. I think you're trying to say you're having these problems, you have these needs, and I think this is the best way to help you. Well, hey, I offer this high ticket item. I think that would best help you because X, Y, and Z. It'll help you avoid X, Y, and Z mistakes, and it'll help you accomplish A, B, and C specific outcomes. And he was like, holy crap, that sounds awesome. That's exactly what I need. Okay, cool. How do I do that? And it was just like the easiest thing in the world because I asked lots of questions, really spoke to his exact needs, and off of the basis of a deep understanding of my market. And it's cake at that point. And so that's my entire strategy for connecting with people. I even do this for sales calls. I do this for connecting with entrepreneurs. I do this with everything in terms of credibility. It's the core of my strategy, which is to ask smart questions, call myself the X guy, which used to be the Udemy guy, then it was the online course guy, and I'm probably about to change it to something else, but it's pretty good. It works pretty well. And it's funny because you can change it whenever you want, and you think you can't, but you actually can, surprisingly, which is something that I'm learning. And also just putting out really great content and connecting with as many people as possible. So all of that, just really simple stuff with some specific subtle strategies that I find very, very effective. It all works stupidly well to become that expert, that go-to person in your industry, to connect with other people, to appear very credible to clients, to prospects, to leads. So start implementing these things. Check out sohelpful.me as well. Come up with a title for yourself. Come up with lists of questions you can ask people. Come up with the specific needs and desires of your market. All these different things. really small. You can knock it all out in an hour and start incorporating this in your business going forward right now. And I can just assure you it'll make a huge difference in your business. So yeah, do all that. And until next time, thanks for listening. Hey, entrepreneurs and experts, I just wanted to thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you learned at least one new big idea that helps you evolve your skills and gets you closer to monetizing your expertise and creating that successful knowledge business. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on iTunes and Stitcher, and check out myepodcast.com for all episodes as well as the tips and tricks mentioned in this episode. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week.